I'm Russell Stahl, at-large representative for Greenville City Council. You may recognize where we're standing. In 2014, a local news story featured the blight of Tent City. The community responded. The community brought food, they brought water, they brought supplies. Unfortunately, despite their great intentions, this may not have been the appropriate response. The numbers in the encampment grew quickly, from 30 to 100 people, and Tent City quickly became an unsafe place. In response, the city nonprofits and service providers collaborated to create a strategy to address the affordable housing problem as well as the problem of life stabilization of the residents living down here. This is when the Greenville Homeless Alliance was created. To address the challenges uncovered by Tent City and to address the challenges that were focused on homelessness, our service providers created the 2015 Homelessness White Paper. The primary recommendations were to provide 35 beds of permanent housing with supportive services for mentally ill and other vulnerable adults that is affordable and safe, hire a homeless coordinator for Greenville County to organize outreach, coordinate services, and help develop housing options, provide shelter beds for at least 15 homeless families, create additional housing units including at least 50 for single room occupancy, 25 for housing first, and 35 for permanent supportive housing, and provide 6 to 15 medical respite beds for people who are too sick for shelters, but not sick enough to justify a hospitalization. The white paper also recommended increased advocacy for transportation, mental health services, returning citizens, and child care vouchers. We recently had the opportunity to talk with Reverend Deb Richardson Moore and Tony McDade, two of our community's greatest advocates for the homeless and those living with homelessness. Deb recently retired as senior pastor at Triune Mercy Center, and Tony recently retired as the executive director of United Ministries. We asked them to reflect on their careers and share their perspectives of where we started, where we are today, and what we hope for in the future.
You know, my calling to work with people who are homeless is all connected into my calling as a minister. For a number of years, I served as an educator and administrator in Baptist congregations in North and South Carolina, and somewhere along the line, it became clear that the ways that God could use congregations in hands-on ministry to really help homeless people, especially families, that was something that was tugging at my heart. So I went back to school for my terminal degree, which ended up leading me to become the executive director of Greenville Area Interfaith Hospitality Network in 2003, providing hospitality, shelter, meals, and services for homeless families that include children, and working with the incredible congregations here in Greenville. In 2016, we did a pretty remarkable thing, which is to merge GAIN into United Ministries. So for the past 4 years, it's been my great privilege to work with that incredible team, staff and volunteers, to really help people find their way to financial self-sufficiency. You know, Tent City, as we stand here and we think back over the years of all that has happened here, Tent City was really Greenville's aha moment, I think. When you know that Greenville is an extraordinarily generous, hospitable, and caring place, all of a sudden, on our television screens and on our social media even then, we realized that 100 of our friends who happened to be homeless without a place to stay were gathering underneath this bridge on both sides, and were calling the dirt or calling makeshift places home. And so it really was that sense that there is indeed an unseen Greenville, and thanks to public media, that unseen Greenville was put onto all of our screens. And the good thing is that people cared deeply and wanted to respond. Greenville's a place of action, so our caring has to follow through. But as we'll discover in these conversations, that sometimes wanting to do something and doing the right thing for the right reason in the right way is harder than it sounds. So not being toxic in our charity, but really expressing God's hospitality to us by sharing that with others means being intentional, and it means being direct. And sometimes it means finding ways to advocate for our friends who are homeless. So besides the aha-ness of the experience of Tent City, what really occurred was a bringing together, a sense that all of the service providers here in the community could come together, and together we could do more, we could be better at our services. And you know, Russell, you and Reed Lehman, y'all were the key directors for that, pulling us together, making sure that we found consensus in those areas of need that we all agreed upon, lots of compromise, to say, yes, we want to see this community be better. We want to see places for homeless folk to call home of their own, but that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of intentionality. And so the Homeless White Paper was produced in 2015, and it literally gave us a roadmap toward reducing homelessness and increasing housing for people, individuals and families here in Greenville.
Hello, I'm Brandon Cook, the Healthcare for the Homeless Program Director at New Horizon Family Health Services. And we've moved from the Bridge to Triune Mercy Center because it's buildings like this where the real work begins. The 2019 report on homelessness found that at least 3,633 men, women, and children experienced homelessness in Greenville County in 2018-2019. 1,106 were students in Greenville County schools. 75% of those entering emergency shelter had no income, and almost 40% of men and women living unsheltered were experiencing chronic homelessness. Our emergency shelters operate at full capacity most of the time, and with a 12,000 unit housing shortage, for those earning $25,000 or less a year in Greenville County, the opportunities to exit homelessness are even more difficult. These numbers are discouraging, but they don't tell the whole story. We've taken strides forward in Greenville in the last few years.
Oh, it was very serendipitous, Brandon. I was a reporter for the Greenville News for 27 years, and I went to seminary to learn more about my beat because I was going to start writing about religion. And when I got into seminary, I was just sort of gobsmacked by the New Testament and Jesus' teachings and liberation theology and his concern for the poor. So when I came out with my Master of Divinity, I just sort of pivoted, came to this church, really quite by accident, and was just amazed at what I saw and the people I met, and started meeting people on the street. And Triune at that time was primarily serving as a sort of relief agency, hot meals, groceries, and I looked around the dining hall and thought, now there's an awful lot of addiction in this place. Why aren't we treating addiction rather than just handing out food and clothing and all that? So that's sort of where we started, and we started sending folks into rehab, giving them a chance at a new life in recovery, and then on into mental health, and then on into social work, and trying to get people into jobs and housing and just all the different things that we felt could help them get on their feet. That's how it all started. Yeah, toxic charity is basically doing something that someone can and should do for themselves. And I think at worst, you very well may be feeding addiction, turning whatever you're giving into drugs or alcohol, and at best, you're creating a childlike dependency. It breeds entitlement rather than independence, often with the very best of intentions, but it just doesn't work. I would say the creation of the Greenville Homeless Alliance and what that is built on is a solid foundation of agencies and faith partners who have long worked together, who've been friends with each other rather than competitors, and now taking that step for the Greenville Homeless Alliance to sort of solidify and give some structure to that and give to employees the chance to wake up every morning and think, what does Greenville need to do about homelessness? Not what does Triune need, what does Miracle Hill need, what does Salvation Army need, what does New Horizons need, what does Greenville need? And how can we all get together to address that? Some of our biggest problems are gentrification and rising house prices. We deal with a lot of people at Triune who quite literally live on $700 to $800 a month. There is no wiggle room in that for rent beyond $200 or $250 a month. And I just think we've got to have some options in that space. One of the most exciting things I have seen happen in recent years is the building of a second permanent supportive housing unit. It's not built yet, but it's on the architect's table, which is Church Street Place at Poe Mill. And when we introduced that project to Carlos Phillips over at the Greenville Chamber, his immediate response was, "Why aren't you building 6 of these?" I was like, yeah, we'd love to build 6 of these. And I just think that's what we need to do. That it just comes a point, we have certain citizens who are never going to be able to house themselves through mental disabilities, physical disabilities, whatever the issue is. And I think if we are going to call ourselves a caring community, we've got to take care of that.
With the significant leadership Deb and Tony have provided, it's hard to imagine not having them at the table when we're discussing how to address homelessness in Greenville. So as they pass the baton, we asked Tony and Deb what advice they would give to those who will continue the work after they've gone.
Well, Deb, after all these years and all the work that we've seen happen in the good that's come into this community, and overcoming the challenges, what are you most hopeful about going forward into the future?
Well, I know I sound like a broken record, but I'm most hopeful about us building more permanent supportive housing, like Reedy Place, like Church Street Place at Poe Mill.
Yep.
I just feel like that is such a good, specific answer for so many of the people, especially that we see at Triune. I also am hopeful because so many of our partners are working together. You know, because you and I have been around in a time that wasn't necessarily so. And now just to see, you know, United Ministries, Triune, Miracle Hill, Salvation Army, New Horizons, just we're together all the time.
Yes.
And I think that can only be a healthy thing. How about you? What are you most hopeful about?
Well, I agree with the things that you said. I think what gives me hope going into the future is the quality of leadership. I mean, we've both experiencing this transition into retirement, and it's a lot of fun to think about having more time, but also wanting to continue to be involved in the work. I'm encouraged by the caliber of the leadership that is emerging in all of in the various ways. For example, Jennifer coming here, and Lizzie Weber coming to United Ministries, people with experience and expertise that they'll bring.
Yeah, and even bringing good ideas from other areas, which I always think is important.
So that Greenville can benefit from having their wisdom here and applying a fresh perspective. I think the nonprofit sector here in Greenville, philanthropic sector especially, are poised to lead in Greenville to make sure that our compassion remains, you know, forthright as a priority, but that we exercise that compassion with wisdom.
Yeah, and also I remember back in 2005 when I started here, and maybe it was just a reason of me knowing so little about homelessness, but I came up with this idea to do backyard mission days to teach people what homelessness looked like, because people in our churches told me they had never seen an encampment, they had never seen anyone living outside, they had never seen anybody living under a bridge. And it may just be where we are now, but now I feel like everybody in Greenville knows that to some extent.
I think that's right.
Yeah, and it talks about it, and it's just much more open, and we're all working on it together.
There are a lot of communities who have gone through what Greenville has gone through, which is a dynamic explosion in so many ways, and we haven't lost, or at least I hope we haven't, I don't think we have, that sense that people still care about each other, that people matter to one another. But as we step into the future, we know that there are still significant challenges. You've mentioned affordable housing, continuing to work on public transportation, and I guess both of us would acknowledge how much more our friends who are mentally ill need services and access.
Yes.
So if I were going to say 3 areas of work that would continue in public-private partnerships and in every way, if we have a chance to look back maybe 10 years from now and see how it has come along, maybe the homeless, the GHA report in 2029 will be not as much of we did well, but there's so much more to do. Maybe that will even be more celebratory.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool?
We can hope so.
Would be cool. So what you going to do in your retirement?
Write and travel, travel and write.
All right.
How about
Very
you?
good. Well, I'm going to read your books, for one thing. You keep writing them, and I'll keep reading them. I've read the ones you've had so far. I hope to stay involved in the nonprofit sector. Myself, I'm planning to do some volunteering, possibly at a Mercy Center somewhere here in town.
Wow.
Can't ever tell, since my son Andrew is on the staff here, and know a lot of these folks from their time at the Place of Hope at United Ministries, and continue to do a little work in the nonprofit sector as with some consulting, especially given these days. There'll be a lot to do.
Yes.
Greenville is remarkably well resourced in so many ways, with people power, expertise, financial resources, continuing to have this new leadership that's coming along to say let's put our smart bets on certain places and in certain ways so that we can maximize the impact, the benefit to people, as you've advocated for affordable housing, for example, for people at every financial echelon, so that it's not just for people at the top or in the middle of our economic stratum, but also those at the very bottom who suffer the most when times are the hardest. But that's the time when our community historically has stepped up, and I think we still got it in us.
I hope so.
I hope so.
Well, I wish you and Cam all the best.
Well, you and Vince the same, and travel and write, and we'll all be the beneficiaries. So.
Thanks.
Great, thanks.
We would like to provide our heartfelt thanks to Reverend Deb Richardson Moore and to Reverend Tony McDade on sharing their thoughts about what is happening with homelessness in Greenville. On behalf of the citizens of Greenville and City of Greenville, we thank Deb and Tony for their dedicated efforts and unselfish service to this community, and for their tireless efforts to make homelessness in Greenville brief and rare.